Hey guys, good morning. It's Friday. Welcome to SJU, two-person SJU. Today, me, I'm Joe Starr, him, he, Eric Goldman. I talk like Tarzan now. We're reviewing season 7 of the Clone Wars. We're a little late, but everybody's been asking for it, and so we're finally getting to it. Thank you guys for hanging in there while you've been waiting for us to get around to it. Why Eric and I? Because we're the ones that watched it. So we're gonna jump in. We're gonna sort of do an overall. We're gonna hit the arcs and talk a little bit about the legacy of the series as a whole. Now that it's over, we're also actually take a second, hit that like button for us. Thank you. We're also going to be getting into y'all's questions and comments, so make sure you're getting loud in the chat and shooting your shot and saying what you have to say. We'll be pulling that stuff and be sort of talking with you guys throughout the episode because we want to know what you think too. Hey, Eric Goldman, how you feeling?
I'm doing well, Joe Starr. How's it going for you? I think the talking like Tarzan thing is totally fine. We're all adjusting to being at home all the time in different ways.
I'm losing words.
It's okay. It's okay. We're all evolving, devolving. It's fine.
Yeah, well, again, I'm really excited to be doing this with you. You've been killing it hosting Hey Fandoms. Like,
thank you.
Truly awesome. So I was really excited to be able to sort of chat Star Wars with you a little bit because we really haven't had a chance to do it either.
We have not. And Clone Wars, and I go back deep with Clone Wars. I've watched it since it began, but also it's a show that kind of like coincided with a lot of my career work wise. I would cover it a lot, and I went to a lot of conventions and stuff for it. So there was definitely a feeling of saying goodbye, some closure here as we watch these final.
Right on. Well, I'm glad I can be here for it. I'm sort of not polar opposite, because polar opposite would be like, I hate these wars in the stars. But I had kind of fallen out of Star Wars a good bit by the time the Clone Wars started. And then I caught a few episodes of Rebels, which caused me to then start going back and really kind of filling in everything that I had missed. But I wanted to, before we get into it, I sort of like looking at things sort of like by their intention, right? Because every piece of art has an intention. And there's this great quote from Dave Filoni on Wikipedia, powered by Fandom, that I wanted to kick us off with, and then we can sort of like jump into our review, right? So this is from Filoni. This was about the series when they announced it was going to happen. Without getting into too much detail, because I love fan speculation, but it'd be a real shame to have done all this work and not use it. So we're looking at everything and going over all those scripts we had. I think the biggest thing for me is, how do we make the show better? And I think that means examining all the work we had done, the work we were planning on doing, and also trying to honor the work of so many people that were in the middle of making stuff. So that to me, sort of set the tone for season 7. Because while I didn't love like every creative choice and stuff like that, what you have here is not just, hey, let's finish our bridge to episode 3, but like, let's write a love letter to our series that didn't get a proper send off. Like, let's make sure everything is respected and honored in the best way possible with a very finite amount of episodes. So I guess that said, how'd you feel about it overall? Do you think it hit the mark?
Yeah, and I mean, so much of it is going to be weighted towards those final 4, right? It's like, because it's sticking the landing, right? And that's the conclusion, and we'll get more into it soon. But I think that they completely nailed the end of the Clone Wars, both the series and the conclusion of the wars themselves, which was pivotal. I did consider these episodes sort of a gift. I did not think the show was going to come back. It had been so many years since it was canceled. And that doesn't mean I would have been happy with anything they gave us. And I also have some quibbles that we'll get into about some of the choices throughout the entire season. But overall, I'm just really happy because we got more Clone Wars. It looked great. There was some amazing moments, and then it just ended so powerfully. And I think it really wrapped up the most important things for this show itself and what it was about and the characters that were most important for it. It didn't get to hit everything. It didn't get to bring back every plot line or character. Right. That if it had never been canceled, we would have had a very different thing, right? We'd have had like 3 more years of the show probably.
Yeah, we probably would have got season 7 would have been the Siege of Mandalore.
Yeah, well, I think the rumor is there was going to be 8 seasons. So I think we would have even had more. So we didn't get that, but what we did get, I think, was very satisfying, especially because Siege of Mandalore was so good and ended the show on such a high note, and really, I think, was a taking a bow moment done right, in a lot of ways.
Yeah, no, I think you're absolutely right. I think the whole show will get weighted towards sticking the landing right in the Siege of Mandalore, but overall, yeah, I think they took the threads they chose to close up were threads that I think really represented sort of the heart and theme of the show. Mm-hmm. Was I really antsy to get through the Echo stuff? Yeah, but I think without resolving something like that, you don't answer some of the core questions that the show was asking about, like the identity of the clones. Are we tools, or are we people? Are we individuals? That are we just a mass of CG faces, or are we each of us separate with our own interests and desires and wants and needs? So I think it was necessary. As much as I wanted to get to the fume between Ahsoka and Maul, every episode. I think I really respect Filoni for being able to like pump the brakes and say, no, like this show was not just that.
Yeah, it was a lot of things. And I also think that if you look at what they did, because I think in a perfect world, right, not only would we have gotten those 7 or 8 seasons, but mm-hmm. when it came back, they would have given them more. I don't think that was ever going to in the cards, right? I think that Disney probably came to them and said, okay, we're going to let you end the Clone Wars, but 12 episodes. Like they weren't saying like, if you want to do 30, you can do 30. It probably was pretty limited. I mean, a lot of the rumors about why Clone Wars was canceled in the first place was budget. It was so freaking expensive. And when George Lucas was paying the bill, it didn't matter because he didn't care if it was that profitable or not. Disney's going to be like any company go, whoa, you're spending this much on this show and it brings in this much money. That being the case, I think they probably were told you have 12 episodes. And then mm-hmm. what do you focus on for those 12? And that's why, it would have been great to have Cad Bane come back or get more closure on Boba Fett's sort of evolution, a lot of things that were set up in earlier episodes. Sure. But what's most important if you only have 12 episodes? And I think that's where I can totally understand where he was coming from to say it's Ahsoka, the clone troopers in general, and Rex, right? And if you look at those 12 episodes, like, because Obi-Wan, my boy Obi-Wan is barely in these episodes, and Anakin's in them, but it's not about him. Like we're getting things that it's tying into what's about him for sure. Mm-hmm. But it's, if you look at what they really focus on, it's like Ahsoka, who I think is at the end of the day, the main character of the Clone Wars, if you have to look at it. And then the clone troopers and Rex, because given those limited amount of episodes, I think he said that's what I need to focus on here. Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think the focus on character made perfect sense. At that point, what else do you have to say about Anakin? We already know, the tragic ending of the Clone Wars is coming. Like we know, I don't think we need any more steps for Anakin to get to where he's going to be. And same with Obi-Wan. I think at that point in Clone Wars, and also because we're a little timeline squiffy, because we also already know events that happen later, whether it's episode 4, or whether it's Star Wars Rebels. I don't think there's any key things left for Obi-Wan to do in this series too. Like we have so many key Obi-Wan moments. I think, like you're saying, it's smart to focus on Ahsoka, to focus on Rex. Mm-hmm. That said, let's see. Billy Business is in the chat. Oh, we know him. He loved Clone Wars season 7. Some bumpy arcs up front, but the ending, holy shit. I think it's what we all think. Here's the thing. I also want to say that there is one issue. Again, I freaking love the Clone Wars overall as a series, but one problem that I think it had in its later seasons, which is funny to say because its later seasons was delivering some of the best stuff, but mm-hmm. also they made this decision to go to almost exclusively these 4-episode arcs, right? Right. And that meant you lived or died by how strong the arc was and how much you invested in the arc, which is why probably to me, the worst storyline they ever did was the 4-parter about the droids. I've never gotten through it. Okay. It's because it's like, if it had been 1 episode, fine. Because I don't mind if they do weird one-offs, but it was this decision where everything's a 4-episode arc. So then you're just like, oh, we're doing 4 episodes of these freaking droids. Yeah. So that's the thing is like, again, yeah. So I think in a perfect world, again, with these 12, maybe they could have jumped around more. And maybe, like, I didn't have nearly as many problems with the center arc about Ahsoka and the sisters as some, but I also think it didn't need to be 4 episodes. But I think they were probably pretty locked into what had been set up before, how much time they had to complete this, how much time Filoni even had. The guy was doing Mandalorian while he was doing this. Yeah. So I think they had to make some sort of hard choices on what they were focusing on. And again, it's not perfect, but I kind of understand why it ended up the way it did.
Yeah. Well, let's get into some of these so-called bumpy arcs up front. So let's jump into the Bad Bunch and closing up Echo.
Bad Batch, Joe. I don't want the internet to attack you.
I'm so sorry. Yeah. Thank you for saving me.
No problem.
Saving me out the gate from fans. I liked the concept of like, and look, all of this is going to be less about like nitpicky reviewing and more about like the concept of storytelling and or whatever. It's all because I loved this concept. I loved the idea that in Camino you would have you know some oopsies. And those oopsies would result in you know a sniper with incredible eyesight or a guy who's like freakishly strong and you know almost like this like X Factor team of clones. I really liked the concept. I think my overall with all of these arcs is I wish they had just wrapped into the Siege of Mandalore.
Right.
Mandalorian just teased us with standalone. Oh, psych! It all tied together, and you know, let me see these weird mutants and how the order affects them. Right.
Yeah, it would have been interesting if they could have come back at the end. If the Bad Batch had been involved in the Siege of Mandalore, even peripherally, maybe. Because we'll talk more about the second arc in a minute and how they did feed it a little bit and more into the finale. But the Bad Batch, you know, it stands by itself for the most part. I like that too. The idea of the ones gone wrong. I mean, they set it up when we met 99 a few seasons ago, who they were kind of named after their squad. But 99 was unfortunately just kind of like, he was one who went wrong, who didn't have a specialty. These guys had these cool specialties. I also think, again, it was interesting because a lot of these episodes, well, the Bad Batch specifically, were one of the arcs that got released as animatics after the show was canceled, which again, I think speaks to how they never thought the show was coming back or they never would have done that. Yeah. So some people were like, well, we've already seen these storylines. Well, first of all, I think most people haven't seen them. I mean, that's pretty next level fan. I know I'm one of them, but I don't think most of the Clone Wars viewers are watching the animatics that have been released. No. But I also think that it makes sense because from a grand perspective, the first great episode of Clone Wars to me was Rookies in season 1, when we saw all those that group of newbies who were kind of in over their head, and that introduced us to Echo and all those guys. And so I could again see Filoni, given only 12 episodes, saying, I want to bring back, you know, did we have to know Echo survived? We didn't, but there was something kind of cool about getting to wrap up everything that happened with the 5 members of the Rookies, because that had become a through line through the show. I just rewatched all Clone Wars before season 7, so it's like, oh yeah, everything that happened with 5s and all these guys through the years. So I could see why. Again, and I think we're going to repeat ourselves a little bit here, but it's like, did it need to be 4 episodes? Maybe not. But that plan was made years ago. That was under George Lucas when they're like, we're doing 4 episode arcs. Yeah. And I think it fed a little bit into Rex and him kind of looking at the grand scheme of thing and what is the role of the clones and how much individuality do we get. So I think there was a little bit there that could feed into the end and what happened.
Well, and then, you know, what the Echo's ultimate fate, I think, is pure theme along those lines, right? Because there's nothing, you know, more how much free will do I have than the very cyberpunk dystopian image of, you know, a guy plugged into a million different machines that are, you know, processing his brain and using his knowledge against him and stuff like that. So, you know, I really like, as episodes, again, they're great. The assault on the facilities as they're trying to, you know, figure out the source of the signal. Even the village fighting back against the droid army, which is, you know, primitive versus technology is like one of George's favorite things. So, you know, you harken back to that. Like, individually, yeah, I enjoyed all of it, but like you said, 4 episodes, maybe not.
Right. We should also mention, though, as you're talking about like some of those action sequences, out of the gate with season 7, it was just the visuals of the show were amazing. I mean, look, Clone Wars began 12 years ago. So even rewatching the first 6 seasons recently, I was struck by how you see the animation really evolve and get better and better, especially the fact that they had like George's open checkbook back then. Hi, Kat. But season 7, I was really impressed. Just when it began, I was like, aesthetically, look at the detail, look at sort of the smoke effects and just the nuance they're putting into this. And the show was always obviously a lot of hard work went into the visuals, but now you could just see everything that they were capable of doing. That was really impressive.
It's wild to me that the show that was the animated series that was a supplemental to the prequels has surpassed the visuals of the prequels.
Yeah. Right. I think because I think like Attack of the Clones, like, Attack of the Clones. It's funny because yes, even Clone Wars, of course, I guess quote unquote dated the early episodes because CG animation just does improve. But it's like where Attack of the Clones, there's a lot of like muddy visuals in that movie. I think it's kind of the ugliest looking Star Wars movie. Even though there's some beautiful images in it too, but I think because they were leaning really heavy into CG at a time when it was still developing. But Clone Wars, yeah, there's just some remarkable visuals in it, and times where you can really tell that they were taking, like, they knew we need to really deliver something sort of epic in scale.
Yeah. Well, so the Viral Fever says we really didn't like that they introduced so many new characters in the last season, like the Bads and the sisters. So let's use that to move into the Martez sisters. Unless you have a little more you want to say is sort of about Echo's arc.
No, it's just interesting. I mean, again, it does beg questions that, of course, there will be. I mean, Filoni's been pretty adamant he doesn't think there'll be any more Clone Wars episodes after this, but there is so many ways to answer other stories. And of course, I do think Echo and the Bad Batch go off together, and I am curious what happens next and how Order 66 affects them. But that's a story for a novel or another animated series or a comic book to tell one
day. A good question for another time,
right?
As we say in Force Awakens. So yeah, let's talk about the Martez sisters a little bit. I really, especially coming off reading the Duel of the Fates script and the lower levels of Coruscant and the riots against the First Order and stuff that are in that unmade episode 9. I really enjoyed sort of sitting around in Coruscant for a little bit with a little bit of the dredges that weren't necessarily scum and villainy or anything, just people trying to get by.
I did as well. So this was an interesting case because I went back and I looked at old articles that I'd written about Clone Wars when after it was canceled. Filoni did a lot of presentations at Celebration and D23 and various conventions about what they would have done, again, because I'm sure he thought it never would happen. And he did one big presentation on Ahsoka in 2016, and he talked about this arc. And a lot of people had noted that it was going to be the sisters were a new invention, because it was supposed to be a male character, a love interest for her. It was going to be kind of taking the place of those sisters or vice versa. But what I think happened was they had to compact 2 storylines, because she was supposed to have 2 big arcs that were her kind of amongst Coruscant arcs showing her development. And they had to kind of make that all happen there. But like you said, I like getting sort of down and dirty with like the regular people. And I think this was thematically, again, a big thing here was Ahsoka having these conversations with them about their viewpoint of the Jedi, which was very negative. And again, she'd already left the Jedi, so you could say, what does it matter? But I still think it was important for her because she finds out, man, it's kind of even worse. Like, not only are their reputation really bad, and she has to kind of think about casualties of war in a way she never has because their parents were killed by, people that were just in their innocence.
Fell out of the chair. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. her parents were, innocents killed in a battle that the Jedi were involved in. But also, I think it really shows her path going forward and her deciding, okay, I'm not technically a Jedi, but I want to do good. I think, Riley did that great video for us about Ahsoka as kind of
you guys should totally watch if you haven't.
You should completely watch it. And I think that this storyline kind of helps fuel what her main point was, which is Ahsoka being the ideal of a Jedi. She might not be a Jedi anymore, but she can live up to kind of what they stood for in a way that they weren't standing for by the end.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think this arc, it's not just about introducing 2 new characters. Although again, like the tie it all up in me wishes we had seen, her and Rex walking sadly to their ship as they're waiting to pick them up. Or
sure.
Whatever, like piddly. That's me just being real piddly. But I think you're absolutely right. I think this in particular is what really wakes up Ahsoka, because without this, her only grievance is they kicked her out.
Right.
And obviously
they didn't trust her.
Yeah, they didn't trust her, and she's got to go. But I really think that this, what this really drives home is really kind of setting up her drive and her motivation moving forward into Rebels and into whatever it is we're going to see next out of Mandalorian. I think you need obviously we can assume it. We're smart, intelligent, problem-solving creatures, but it's nice to actually see the arc where you really start to set up her evolution. You know, it's
Mhm.
the rich kid in the rich private school gets tossed out and really sees, oh wow, you know, actually this whole construct was flawed from the start,
Mhm. Mhm.
and she played some part in it. You know, even though she did her best not to, you know, at all times, but.
But she was, yeah, she was part of the system for so long, and I see lots of chat saying that the Martus sisters should have been 2 episodes max. I mean, I agree, and I think that again, in the ideal world, again, 4 episodes is a lot, and I do think the construct of what the Clone Wars became in those later seasons, or those 4 episode arcs, sometimes was great, but sometimes really hurt it. And yes,
Sure.
Martez sisters, I have nothing, I have no problem with it conceptually, and even some of the things that happen. 2 episodes might have been a tighter, better way to tell that story.
The only place where I got caught up, and this is just like my dumb Star Wars brain, right? Was I was like, their hairstyles are too modern, which is very stupid because it's space, right? And has
Right.
nothing to do with it. But in my head, I'm like, no, they should be looking like what a cool person would have looked like in 1975 or 1977, because this is pre-New Hope. You know?
Well, actually, shouldn't it be 1957?
Yeah, they should be wearing brutal skirts.
There you go. See, because Dex's Diner was all 50s style.
Yeah,
It all makes sense.
This should be somewhere. They should be like Woodstock hippies.
There you go.
Space Woodstock hippies. My brain is very stupid as to what Star Wars should and should not look like at all times. I make no sense. But I loved the escape from a cartel planet was so cool. You know, an escape from that citadel. That whole sequence was great. And again, it really shown to me that Star Wars is about the little things. The idea of building your own spaceship and naming it is so cool. It's still so cool to me. That's something that's always spoken to me, like as a fan of Star Wars, like the idea that these people could like modify a freighter, you know, and make their destiny, or just seeing that, like, yeah, it's a big crime boss controlled city, but for whatever reason, like there's normal people in it, right? Like I think Filoni did a great job with these arcs, you know, giving you cantina type side characters and stuff like that you kind of go, oh, that guy's going to stay with me, just like the guy who follows the gang to the Millennium Falcon in
Right.
New Hope, and then, you know, narcs on him to the Empire. Like that guy has always stuck with me. Like the guy who's going to be like, that's them over there. Like that guy will stick with me.
Yeah.
I think Filoni's been great at introducing side characters.
And I believe that was the arc when he snuck in a bunch of characters that were specifically the original Kenner action figures. So it was like Greedo, Hammerhead, like they were wearing the costumes that those original figures wore, which never matched the movies.
Did not catch that.
It was all little background stuff. By the way, Ahsoka has her own clunky speeder bike that, you know, one day we will see a story of her coming back to get.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. We definitely, or she'll have it in Mandalorian season.
Maybe she'll have it in Mandalorian. Yes.
I'm going to pause this real quick. We're going to keep talking Star Wars, and we're going to keep jumping into what you guys have to say in the chat. I did want to pause real quick and just say thank you guys for watching us every day. Thank you for sticking with us and hanging out and having some funs with us and putting up with my cat. People always ask how they can support the channel. Do we have a Patreon? Do we have Super Chat? Do we have this and that? No, we don't. The best way you can support the channel, hit that bell. Hit that like button for us. I know we used to do like fun like challenges and stuff like that. We will get back to it as soon as we're not, in the midst of a pandemic and, struggling to keep our heads above water. I promise. All that fun will return at some point. In the meantime, hit that like for us. We super appreciate it. SJU is going to be live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Today is the first of something we're gonna do for fun on Fridays. And that's doing more reviews. And on weeks where there aren't like big titles to do reviews, we'll be doing like some legacy stuff, some look backs. So if you really want to know like what Roth and Spencer think about The Dark Knight, stuff like that. So let us know in the comments what stuff you'd like us to sort of do look backs on and discussions on and stuff like that. And we'll try to get to it. And that said, let's get into some fan comments. Arkham O says, to just sort of transition us into the Siege of Mandalore a little bit. The clones having their helmets painted like Ahsoka while they're trying to kill her is probably one of the most heartbreaking parts to me. Bug. Yeah, totally agree. I loved that visual. I think he did such a good job of playing with the idea. Well, Filoni and everyone involved. Filoni doesn't write all of these and direct all of these and also animate all of these.
No,
the entire team did such a good job with what could be a wall, with what could be a hurdle. We know how it ends. That's such a tough thing for any kind of prequel to jump. We know how it ends, and a lot of them don't do it well. The Hobbit movies put Gandalf and Legolas in peril all the time, and it's like I have no attachment to that, because I know they're fine. But Filoni did such a good job playing with the concept that we know where it's all going, that he did all these tiny little things just to make it hurt a little more. And her unit in formation with like the custom painted helmets and everything, you're just like, oh, you dick.
It's so impressive, right? Because think about the fact that the one thing Clone Wars had for all these years was, well, you don't know what happens to Ahsoka and Rex. You don't know if they make it out. And then the way things happen, the show gets canceled. He loves these characters too much, so he brings them back on Rebels. He doesn't want to go without them. But then they say, you're going to get through the ending. But now we know that Rex and Ahsoka survive. And Maul, by the way, because he used to be another factor of, does he make it out of the Clone Wars alive? So suddenly these three major players, we know they're going to survive. Which is why it's so impressive that how impactful, sad, emotional it still was, when it could have just been like, whatever. Ahsoka,
yeah, you could have been ticking boxes very easily. You could have been ticking your episode 3 bingo.
Yeah.
But instead he did this dance with it. As soon as the episode started dropping, you started seeing all these split screens people were creating, where moments were like poetry, where he was matching up and like riffing with what happens in episode 3. The biggest thing I can say about season 7 is it tricked me into watching episode 3. As soon as I was done, I started watching episode 3 again. It's not a movie I wanted to watch again, but I was like, man, I gotta jump in. I gotta jump in. And we'll get into a little more about the series as a whole and its legacy. But if nothing else, it really took the world that George introduced really well and maybe didn't execute well, in my own opinion, and like really showed you what it could have been.
Yeah. Right? Yeah, it really was. It was so cool. The tying into episode 3 here. Obviously, just having it be, Anakin has to go sort of help, and Obi-Wan have to go and save the Chancellor, because we know what's going down right on Coruscant. But then also, they had the scene where they literally walk into a scene from episode 3, right? Like where the hologram, where all the Jedi talking, Mace and Obi-Wan. Really Ahsoka walks in. That was really cool. And also because I never had the problem of like, yes, Clone Wars was a big swing just saying that Anakin had a Padawan, right? But some people are like, well, why was she never mentioned episode 3? I'm like, look, a lot was going down in episode 3. He might not have, you don't mention everyone who means something to you. Yeah. But the fact that they were able to still tie it in that way. And even, there's a lot of like poignancy to things that happen when Yoda says, talks to her about there's something on your mind. And she doesn't bring up that Maul had this warning about Anakin, which could that have saved she have changed everything if she did. And it's a failing on her part, I guess you could say, but it's also sort of a sad, like she still wants to believe in Anakin. Cause even we see in Rebels, it's like, it's very hard for her to.
Well, it's interesting. You can, from a certain point of view, you can look at it as a failing, but I think you can also look at it as a direct consequence
of what they
how
did.
The council treated her.
Yeah, because Mace is being a dick to her right in that scene.
Yeah, literally. This is a meeting for like. I don't care about your witting. Shut up, get out of here. I think it's a direct Yoda's like, hey, something on your mind, and no guy that tossed me out of the only home that I've ever had, I'm not going to tell you a thing. I've seen what you do when you stop agreeing with someone or you stop accepting someone. And I don't think she wants that for her master.
Yeah. And I think, of course, we see that Yoda is going to be much more sympathetic than Mace and is, much kinder to her, but still that, the overall mistreatment she had, that there were consequences. Like, it is playing into and way deepening the episode 3 thing of like a bunch of tragedies unfolding at the same time. Some of them that could have been stopped if people had kind of looked at the bigger picture in a better way.
Yeah. Let's stop talking about stupid things like story and theme and just get into all the really cool explodey stuff in the Siege of Mandalore, because there was a ton of it.
Oh man. Two of the best action sequences ever in Star Wars, if I may be so bold, which was first Ahsoka jumping down, like, her Siege of Mandalore, which is, sort of leaping out of the ship, and the midair fight where she is jumping ship to ship and taking them all down. It was purely there to be, isn't Ahsoka freaking awesome? And it completely worked on that level. Yeah. It was just amazing spectacle. And then, of course, the Maul Ahsoka lightsaber fight, which was
phenomenal. Even just all the chase sequence in the tunnels was great. The cat and mouse with all those poor clones. What I like about especially the Siege of Mandalore stuff is that it doesn't look effortless. Like, as badass as Ahsoka, like jumping from ship to ship and fighting her way down, feels like, it never feels like she's Batman. Like it feels desperate and it feels dangerous. Like, and just the fact that they captured all of that, in this one like short sequence, I thought was so cool. And then, of course, that amazing lightsaber fight, which I believe was motion captured.
Yeah, with Ray Park.
Yeah, with Ray Park. Yeah.
Which is a really cool. It's one of those things that, look, it's such a sort of respectful move, because it's like Ray Park is Darth Maul, and now Sam Witwer has been voicing Darth Maul in animation and now in Solo, even in live action stuff for a while now. But to get Ray Park to do that mocap, and I don't know if we're going to see Maul again or not, because of, Solo's not going to get a sequel, and Rebels kind of told you what ends up happening with him. So if this is truly the last time we get a big Maul story, probably won't be, because there are still stuff to fill in. But it was just really cool, and to have him fighting, and the fight itself was just incredible. And I really like what you mentioned is very true about the fact that no one is perfect, including Ahsoka, even in the finale. When she is saving herself and doing something kind of incredible midair, she misses the first time when she's trying to grab Rex's ship, and that's pull herself back. It's nice touches like that. These are superheroes, to be sure, but they're not like every single thing works for them every time.
Yeah, no, I dug. And then, again, everything in service of the story that it's leading up to. I think they did a great job without losing any of his menace. Or maybe because of his menace. Like, Maul is a scary, scary guy, and there is his whole deal right now is he just wants to survive what's coming. He knows what's coming is so huge and so earth-shattering that there's no really winning. It's just like build up your tower defense as much as you can and just hunker down and hope you can get through it, because there's no like getting past Sidious or surpassing him.
Yeah, he knows. It's a cool character. And again, I mean, Phantom Menace, just from a few minutes of screen time and an incredible lightsaber fight, we're all like, Darth Maul is awesome, but he wasn't really a character. But Clone Wars and Rebels have made him into a full character that's a really great character, because he is scary when he needs to be scary and formidable, and he got to do some amazing things in this, kind of pulling the hyperdrive down and whatnot. But he also knows that he's a pawn. He knows that he was sort of used by Sidious, and like you said, he can't stop Sidious. He completely got owned by him already on the Clone Wars, him and his brother fighting alongside each other.
Right.
So there's a lot of interesting what Filoni has done with Darth Maul, I think, is a great example of how he's taken something from the prequels, which I think was one of the more successful aspects, just visually, of course, but still deepened it and made it way more interesting and nuanced and way more to kind of dissect than we had in the prequels, where it was pretty surface.
Yeah. Well, I want to make sure I've got all your thoughts on the Siege of Mandalore. I think you and I could just sort of rant about this for a few hours. It's always hard for me to like edit in real time.
Right.
So do you have any sort of final thoughts on the Siege of Mandalore?
No, it just, I think if we should just talk about like the final moments, the final two scenes of the show, which is, first of all, the, scene with Rex and Ahsoka when they crash land, because first of all, just that is dark and deep and sad, but also inspiring because Ahsoka worked so hard to not kill any of the clones. She knew that they were being manipulated. She did not, that they were good people underneath. She worked so hard not to kill them, and then they all die. And they're trying to kill her the whole time. And Jesse, I was really glad they brought Jesse back because, again, there wasn't a lot of other clones you can use that have been like, hey, that guy has been throughout the series. But Jesse was there because Cody couldn't be there because Cody was off in Revenge of the Sith. So Jesse kind of played the proxy there, and that worked really well. But yeah, the fact that they all do die, and then that tribute to them, which is a visual counterpoint to the fact when that door's open and they're all standing there for her proudly. And now she's standing in front of these helmets. They've all died, all these men who were there with her symbol on them, and they died trying to kill her. Yeah. But she is so respectful of them. I mean, I'm going to get a little teared up talking about it right now. I mean,
it ties up that shot is the entire point of the series.
Right.
What are we? Are we clones? Do we matter?
Mm-hmm.
Are we just tools? Are we men? I think that shot is the whole series. That this Ahsoka Tano, who I think is the protagonist.
Yeah.
It's an ensemble show, but
it's an ensemble show with Obi-Wan, Anakin, and Ahsoka at the center. But ultimately, I think you have to say it's Ahsoka's story.
It's Ahsoka show, but you have the protagonist of the series, overlooking this, this impromptu graveyard that they probably did not have time to actually dig and should have gotten the hell out a lot sooner, most likely.
Sure.
Looking over, and there's your answer, right? Because the Jedi necessarily never saw them as anything more than tools a lot of the time, and neither did Sidious saw everyone as a pawn, and the normies on Coruscant, the Martez sisters and folks like that probably even saw the clones as just like, this is military aggression and I just want to live my life,
right?
But you have this one woman that saw them as people and individuals. Really, really cool.
It was really, really well. It's so powerful. And honestly, that could have been the final scene and that would have been amazing. And then we got the one extra scene, which it's funny. It's like, on one hand, I don't think we necessarily needed it, but I guess we did in the grand scheme of things, because as you said, we already had gotten Anakin's story enough. And we kind of, between Clone Wars and the movies, we knew everything that motivated him. But because Clone Wars deepened his story so much and gave him this dynamic with Ahsoka, I'm really glad we got that last scene. And it's interesting because we don't know exactly when this is happening. Is this before or after? It's like, because we see them confront each other on Rebels, which is amazing. But to see that visual of Darth Vader, and again, I think it, like you said, Filoni kind of translates Lucas so well. And there are moments in Revenge of the Sith I think are impactful emotionally, but some aren't as much as they could be. And this, like him picking up this lightsaber, what it meant to him, what she meant to him, what he lost, in the service of what he's become, is really amazing.
No, I absolutely agree with you. And I think there's something specifically about seeing Vader in Clone Wars tied to this version of Anakin that truly makes him sad.
Yeah,
because even if you watch, for me at least, I can speak for me. Like I watch Clone Wars and I watch Rebels, but there's still a disconnect between Anakin in the series and the movies for me, right? Like I know that there's supplemental stuff that is attached to Vader and in the original trilogy and stuff like that. But there was something about seeing Vader in the context of Clone Wars and in the context of Anakin's arc and everything we've seen him do in Clone Wars to becoming this broken down, this messed up, broken down, sad Sith Lord that made some very bad choices. Standing alone in the snow with his old friend's lightsaber, which I thought was phenomenal.
I did too, especially because I think one of the biggest failings of the prequels, and I should say I'm not a prequel hater. There are things I love about them, but I think one of the biggest failings, and it goes to Attack of the Clones, is failing to sell the Padme Anakin romance. Because if you're going to make it the crux of his fall, which I think makes sense, you have to invest in this love story. And of course, people make fun of the love story instead, and that's a shame.
Right.
So the fact that this series was able to so well sell the sibling-like, mentor Padawan relationship, the importance of her, that this is someone he deeply cared for.
Yeah.
Makes that last scene just land so well. Just to have it's so heavy and so sad, and just incredibly impressive.
Well, I've got to wrap us up a little bit. Travis, I thought this was a great sort of comment that I'll seg into a question as we start to wrap up. Travis Spencer said he would have loved to see the arc of Maul's escape from Sidious. Are there any outstanding threads from the series that you would have really hoped to have seen, like whether it's season 7 or something later?
So of course the one he's talking about, and again I had to make these big decisions, was told in comic book form, and again that's not ideal because it was going to be a Clone War story, Son of Dathomir, that's called. So it would have been cool to be in animation, but I get why they didn't retell it. I think the Cad Bane Boba Fett stuff would have been cool, just because that was remember when season 2 premiered and they're like bounty hunters, like that was when they're really opening up the door to that world. Cad Bane came in so strong at the end of season 1. Boba Fett, we kind of got this underlying thing of who he was and becoming the Boba Fett we'd know. I would have liked to have gotten that closure and seen a little bit more of that. Of course, again, Mandalorian especially, not only are there these, talk that Boba Fett is supposed to be on the show, but just the world they're in, I feel like Filoni will get to tell these stories eventually, but in a perfect world, I would have liked to have seen that on Clone Wars.
Well, let's talk a little bit about, I think there was a little scene setting as we sort of get into what the legacy of the show is, and specifically season 7 is going to be moving forward. I did feel like there was a little scene setting for what's to come, right? With Bo-Katan and sort of tying a bow on Mandalore a little bit. I definitely think they're continuing to plant seeds,
and a very purposeful visual echo of Ahsoka's appearance at the end of Rebels in the white cloak. It's the only 2 times we've seen her. She's in a gray cloak here, which is probably a Lord of the Rings reference because Filoni does love himself Lord of the Rings. But that is a very big visual echo of her appearing at the end of both these shows in this sort of cloaked form.
Yeah.
Which again, Rebels setting the stage for what happens to her next, and it looks like Mandalorian is going to answer that question.
And then, speaking of other things that happened to her, a lot of people in the chat are talking about the Ahsoka book. A lot of people are guessing check that out. I haven't read it yet. Riley really sold it to me again, in her essay about why Ahsoka Tano is the greatest Jedi. Actually, Ryan, if you wouldn't mind just dropping a link to that essay in the description of this video, it's really good. It's really worth checking out. Eric, any sort of final thoughts on season 7?
Season 7, I mean, I think it was a great
show in general, yeah.
And the show in general. I mean, in a way, season 7 was a great representation of the show because, again, I love the Clone Wars. Every season of the Clone Wars was a mixture of storylines that I think people were like way into thought went on a little too long. So in a way, you could say this is perfectly wrapping up the Clone Wars, except it didn't have the worst of the things, which was Lucas's strange inclinations to do. Let's do a banking storyline. Let's do a Jar Jar storyline.
We have to fix this savings account.
Right. So they left out that stuff, but I think it did, this felt like a proper representation of the Clone Wars, including Siege of Mandalore, which is some of the best Star Wars ever, which Clone Wars throughout its run would have these amazing storylines. And I think the legacy of the show, repeating ourselves, but it's like, first of all, deepening the prequels incredibly, giving a lot more depth, making things matter from the prequels more.
Yeah,
that's a really impressive thing to do. I keep using that word. Maybe it's the Darth Vader in me. But the fact that they take these movies. I don't know if you saw yet, Joe, the second episode of the Disney Gallery show about the making of Mandalorian.
I haven't watched Ep 2 yet. No.
So Filoni has a part where he is talking about the Duel of the Fates battle. So nothing to do with Ahsoka, but the way he describes it, and you can see all the other directors sitting there listening to him. And he's talking about what it means thematically, what it means for the characters, the emotion, and it's all riveting. And I'm like, man, I love that scene as a fight. But again, I don't think Lucas sold all these things you're talking about, the emotion, the nuance. He wasn't great at doing that. Lucas was amazing at the ideas, and Filoni just translates Lucas. So him taking the prequels, I think Clone Wars Legacy is taking the prequels, adding so much more depth and emotion to it. And then Ahsoka, just as a character, who already, I think, has now cemented herself as like an all-time great Star Wars character. an all-time favorite Star Wars character, and the fact that she'll finally be making the translation to live action, it sounds like, is great. But even if she never did, I think people would just always name her as one of their favorite Star Wars characters. So that's another.
No, I absolutely agree. I guess, the thing that I think will stick with me with the show, at Jack says, I thought the last episode's somewhat lack of dialogue was very incredible and emotional, and it kind of felt like the old Tartakovsky Clone Wars shorts. I think what's always going to stick with me are those quiet intros to the Siege of Mandalore, the Red Clone Wars, the Lucasfilm Limited. Just that stark feeling of dread, which again, like you said, I think George introduced the idea of dread, but Filoni really makes you feel it.
Yeah.
And I think that's going to be the lasting sort of legacy of the show for me.
By the way, they went so far with the old school Lucasfilm logo. I was like, man, it'd been cool if they'd thrown in the 20th Century Fox one too. But even though they owned them now, I wonder if that still was something they couldn't work out.
Right. Yeah, I am waiting for a dun 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 at the beginning of a Star Wars at some point. So you and I are on the same page there. Fingers crossed. Eric, thank you so much for chatting about the show with me a little bit. I'm sorry I gotta cut us off. I feel like
no problem. I'm pleasure to talk about Clone Wars because I love it so much.
Yeah, man. Hey, and thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Hit us in the comments with movies, shows, stuff you guys want us to take a look back and review. Make sure you hit like for us, hit that bell. We appreciate you guys being here all the time. Thank you, Moulton. Thank you, Ryan. And y'all have a good weekend. Take care of yourselves. We'll see you Monday. Bye.